Next up, we're discussing the shocking news of Michelle Trachtenberg's passing and how it sheds light on the complexities of organ transplantation in the US. I'm your host, and today we're diving into the world of healthcare to explore the intricacies of liver transplants and what can be done to improve patient outcomes. The fact that Michelle Trachtenberg's liver transplant may have been rejected, leading to her death, raises questions about the effectiveness and accessibility of organ transplantation in the U.S. healthcare system, and whether more can be done to support patients undergoing such procedures.
Wow, this is, really sad news. I had no idea she had undergone a liver transplant. What exactly happens when an organ transplant is rejected? Is it like your body just decides to fight it off or something?
Exactly. When an organ transplant is rejected, the immune system recognizes the new organ as foreign and attacks it, trying to reject it. It's like your body is saying, "Hey, this isn't mine, get it out of here." And that can lead to some serious complications, including infection, scarring, and even death.
That makes sense, I guess. But what about the success rate of liver transplants? Are they usually successful?
Well, the success rate of liver transplants has improved significantly over the years, with around 75% to 85% of patients surviving for at least 5 years after the transplant. However, rejection is still a major concern, and it's not uncommon for patients to experience some level of rejection.
Okay, that's interesting. So, what can be done to prevent rejection? Are there any new treatments or technologies on the horizon that could improve patient outcomes?
Great question. There are several strategies that can help reduce the risk of rejection, including immunosuppressive medications, which help suppress the immune system's response to the new organ. Researchers are also exploring new technologies, such as gene editing and stem cell therapies, that could potentially improve the success rate of transplants.
Whoa, gene editing? That sounds like science fiction. How does that work?
Laughs. Well, it's not quite Star Trek yet, but it's definitely an exciting area of research. Gene editing technologies such as CRISPR allow scientists to modify the genes of the donor organ, making it more compatible with the recipient's immune system.
That sounds promising. But what about accessibility? I mean, how many people are on the waiting list for liver transplants? And how long do they typically have to wait?
Unfortunately, the waiting list for liver transplants is quite long, with over 11,000 people waiting for a liver transplant in the US alone. The wait time can vary depending on factors such as blood type, medical urgency, and availability of organs.
That's staggering. And what about the cost? I mean, how much does a liver transplant typically cost? And is it covered by insurance?
Great question. The cost of a liver transplant can range from $500,000 to over $1 million, depending on factors such as hospital fees, surgeon fees, and post-operative care. Most insurance plans cover the majority of the costs, but out-of-pocket expenses can still be significant.
Wow, that's crazy. I had no idea it was so expensive. Do you think there's a way to make organ transplantation more accessible and affordable for people?
Absolutely. There are many organizations working to improve access to organ transplants, including nonprofits that provide financial assistance to patients and advocacy groups pushing for policy changes to increase organ donation rates.
Right. I see. This is all really interesting, but also kind of overwhelming. What can we, as individuals, do to support patients undergoing organ transplants?
Well, one thing we can do is become organ donors ourselves. Registering to be an organ donor can make a huge difference in the lives of those waiting for a transplant.
Yeah. That's a great point. I'll have to look into that. What about supporting organizations that provide financial assistance to patients? Are there any reputable groups we can donate to?
Yes. There are many wonderful organizations doing amazing work in this area. One example is the National Kidney Foundation, which provides financial assistance to patients undergoing kidney transplants.
Okay. Got it. I'll have to check them out. This conversation has been really eye-opening, actually. I had no idea how complex and challenging organ transplantation was.
Next up, we're discussing the shocking passing of Michelle Trachtenberg, a talented actress known for her iconic roles in Buffy the Vampire Slayers and Gossip Girls. But what's even more striking is her brave revelation about the dark side of Hollywood, specifically her allegations against Joss Whedon. I mean, can you believe that someone as influential as Whedon could be accused of such heinous behavior?
Right? So, like, how common is this kind of abuse of power in the entertainment industry? Is it like an open secret or something?
Well, sadly, it's more common than you'd think. I mean, we've seen it with Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, and now these allegations against Joss Whedon. It's a pattern of behavior that's been enabled by the very system that's supposed to protect its stars.
Oh my god, that's so disturbing. I had no idea. So, what kind of support systems are in place for victims like Michelle Trachtenberg? Are there, like, resources available to them?
Great question. You see, the entertainment industry has made some progress in recent years with initiatives like the #MeToo movement and organizations that provide support for survivors of harassment and abuse. But there's still a long way to go. I mean, we need to create a culture where victims feel empowered to speak out without fear of retaliation or damage to their careers.
Hmm, right? It's like the whole whisper networks thing where people know about these abusers but don't say anything because they're scared. I've heard stories about how some actresses will like warn each other about certain directors or producers.
Exactly. And that's exactly what needs to change. We need to create an environment where people feel comfortable coming forward without fear of being ostracized or blacklisted. I mean, Michelle Trachtenberg's bravery in speaking out against Joss Whedon is a testament to the fact that there are still many people who are willing to challenge the status quo.
Hmm. So, what about the role of power dynamics in all this? Like, how does someone like Joss Whedon get away with this behavior for so long?
That's a great question. You see, when you're in a position of power, like a director or producer, you have a tremendous amount of influence over people's careers, and that can be used to silence victims or cover up abuse. It's like the ultimate form of gaslighting.
Wow, that's so insidious. It's like the more powerful you are, the more you can get away with. But what about like accountability? Are there any real consequences for people like Joss Whedon?
Well, that's a complicated question. I mean, in some cases, yes, there are consequences, but often it's just a slap on the wrist or a quiet settlement, and the perpetrator gets to continue their career with minimal damage. It's like the system is rigged against victims.
Right. So, what can we do to change this? Like, how can we create a more just system that actually holds people accountable for their actions?
Great question. I think it starts with education and awareness. We need to teach people about consent, boundaries, and respect. And we need to create systems of accountability that are transparent and fair, where victims feel empowered to come forward without fear of retaliation.
Um, hmm. I see what you're saying. It's like a cultural shift needs to happen where we prioritize the well-being and safety of all individuals, especially those in vulnerable positions.
Exactly. And it's not just about the entertainment industry. This is a societal problem that requires a societal solution. We need to create a world where abuse of power is never tolerated and where victims are always believed and supported. Next up, we're diving into the shocking world of celebrity deaths with a case that's left many unanswered questions. I'm talking about the recent passing of Michelle Trachtenberg, the talented actress known for her roles in Gossip Girl and Buffy the Vampire Slayers, and today we're exploring the mysterious circumstances surrounding her death, which we've titled The Untimely Demise of a Hollywood Starlet. You might be wondering how someone so young and vibrant could leave us so soon, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
Right. I'm still trying to process this news. So, Michelle Trachtenberg was found dead in her apartment, and the police are saying it's not suspicious. That seems odd. Can you walk me through what happened?
Exactly. The details are pretty shocking. According to reports, Miss Trachtenberg was found unconscious and unresponsive by her mother in her New York City apartment. The authorities were called, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Now here's where it gets interesting. Despite the sudden nature of her death, the police have stated that they're not treating it as suspicious.
That does seem strange. I mean, shouldn't they be investigating all possible angles? What if someone was involved? Are they just ruling out foul play because she was a celebrity or something?
That's a great point. It's almost like the authorities are giving her death a free pass because of who she is. But let's look at the facts. Michelle Trachtenberg had recently undergone a liver transplant, and there were potential complications. The investigation is still ongoing, but it seems they're leaning towards natural causes.
Okay. I'm not sure I buy that. I mean, what if there were underlying factors that contributed to her death? Shouldn't the police be looking into her medical history more thoroughly? And what about the fact that she was only 39 years old? Isn't that pretty young to die of natural causes?
Absolutely. It's a very valid concern. And you're right, her age does raise some red flags. I think it's essential for the authorities to be transparent about their investigation and provide more information about what led them to conclude that her death wasn't suspicious. We need to consider all possibilities here.
Right. This is all so confusing. So, let me get this straight. Michelle Trachtenberg dies suddenly, and the police aren't treating it as suspicious, but there are all these unanswered questions about her medical history and potential complications from the liver transplant. It's like, what if this was an ordinary person, not a celebrity? Would they be getting the same treatment?
Exactly! That's the million-dollar question. If this were anyone else, would the investigation be handled differently? It's crucial to separate the facts from speculation and ensure that justice is served, regardless of the individual's status or fame.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this. It just seems like there are so many loose ends. And what about her final Instagram post? Wasn't she talking about wanting to look like naughty Tinkerbell or something? Is that relevant at all?
Ah, yes. Her final post is definitely an interesting aspect of this story. While it might not be directly related to her death, it does give us a glimpse into her state of mind in the days leading up to her passing. Perhaps we can explore that further and see if there are any connections to be made.
Right? I'm just thinking out loud here, but what if she was struggling with something more than just her health? Maybe there were other factors at play that contributed to her death?
That's a very astute observation. We can't rule out the possibility that Michelle Trachtenberg was dealing with personal struggles or emotional turmoil. It's essential to consider all aspects of her life, not just her physical health, when trying to understand what might have led to her untimely demise.
This is all so complex. I feel like we're just scratching the surface here. Can we talk more about her career and how she might have been affected by the pressures of being a celebrity?
Absolutely. Michelle Trachtenberg's career spanned decades, and she was exposed to the highs and lows of the entertainment industry from a very young age. It's possible that the stresses of fame, combined with her personal struggles, could have played a role in her death.
Right. I'm just thinking about all the other celebrities who have died suddenly or under mysterious circumstances. Is there a pattern here that we're not seeing?
Now that's an interesting topic. There are certainly cases where celebrity deaths have raised more questions than answers. Perhaps we can explore those examples and see if there are any common threads or warning signs that we can learn from.
This conversation is giving me chills. I feel like we're uncovering a much larger issue here. Can we keep digging and see where it takes us?
Next up, we're discussing the tragic deaths of young celebrities like Michelle Trachtenberg and Liam Payne in an episode I like to call The Dark Side of Fame. We're going to dive into the world of celebrity culture and explore how the pressures of fame can affect mental health. It's a topic that's both fascinating and heartbreaking, as we've seen time and time again how even those who seem to have it all can struggle with inner demons.
Wow, I had no idea Michelle Trachtenberg passed away. That's so sad. I mean, I grew up watching her on Gossip Girl and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She was always so talented and full of life, you know? What happened to her?
Yes, it's tragic. Michelle Trachtenberg was just 39 years old when she passed away in her New York apartment. The cause of death is still under investigation, but it's a stark reminder that even those in the public eye can struggle with mental health issues and addiction. And it's not just her. We've seen it with Liam Payne, who died at just 31 years old after falling from a hotel balcony.
Right. I remember hearing about Liam Payne's death, but I didn't realize it was so recent. It's like, you see these people on TV and social media, and they seem to have everything, but behind the scenes, they're struggling just like everyone else. It's really eye-opening.
Exactly. And that's what we want to explore in this episode. The pressures of fame, the impact on mental health, and what can be done to support those who are struggling. I mean, think about it. These celebrities are under constant scrutiny. Their every move is watched and criticized by millions of people. It's like living in a fishbowl, with no escape from the pressure.
That's so true. I can only imagine how hard it must be to deal with that kind of attention all the time. And it's not just the fame itself, but also the fear of losing it, you know? The fear of not being relevant anymore, of not being loved by their fans. It's like they're living on a tightrope, and one wrong move can send everything crashing down.
That's a great point. And it's not just the celebrities themselves, but also their families and friends who are affected by their struggles. I mean, think about Liam Payne's son, Bear, who's now growing up without a father. It's heartbreaking to think about the impact that his death will have on that child's life.
Oh, wow. I didn't think of that. It's like we're so focused on the celebrity themselves, but there are people around them who are also suffering. And what about the fans? I mean, when a celebrity dies, it's like the whole world is mourning, you know? It's like we feel like we've lost someone we knew personally.
Exactly. The impact of a celebrity's death can be felt far and wide, and it's not just about the person themselves, but also about the community that they've built around them. And that's why it's so important to have open and honest conversations about mental health, to break down the stigma surrounding it, and to provide support networks for those who are struggling.
Hmm, right. I never thought about it that way. But what can be done to support these celebrities? I mean, they have access to the best resources, the best therapists, the best everything. What more can be done?
Well, that's a great question. One thing that can be done is to provide more mental health resources specifically tailored to the needs of people in the public eye. I mean, they face unique challenges that the rest of us don't, and they need support systems that understand those challenges. We'll explore this topic further, including some real-world examples of how celebrities have struggled with mental health issues and what we can learn from their experiences.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So it's like we need to create a safety net for these celebrities to catch them when they're falling before it's too late. But how do we do that? How do we reach out to someone who's struggling without being intrusive or judgmental?
Ah, great question. That's exactly what we'll be discussing in the next segment. We'll talk to experts in the field of mental health and hear from celebrities themselves who have struggled with these issues. It's going to be a really eye-opening conversation, and I think it will help us all better understand the complexities of fame and mental health.
Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to that. This is already getting really interesting, and I feel like I'm learning so much. Can we also talk about some specific examples of celebrities who have struggled with mental health issues, like what happened with Michelle Trachtenberg or Liam Payne? What were the signs that something was wrong?
Absolutely. We'll dive into those stories and more, and explore how they can help us better understand the importance of mental health support for people in the public eye. It's a topic that's both fascinating and heartbreaking, but ultimately, it's one that we need to talk about if we want to create a world where everyone can thrive, regardless of their fame or fortune. Next up, we're discussing the age-old question of how to live longer, and I'm excited to dive into this topic with my co-host today. We're calling this episode The Ultimate Life Hack: 4 Simple Ways to Live Longer. Now, when it comes to living a long and healthy life, there are many factors at play, but one crucial aspect is maintaining a healthy weight, which is often measured by our body mass index, or BMI.
Yeah, I've always been a bit skeptical about BMI as a metric. Isn't it like super outdated or something? I mean, what about athletes or people with really muscular builds? Wouldn't they get unfairly categorized as overweight or obese?
That's a great point. You're right, BMI isn't perfect. It was originally developed in the 19th century by Adolphe Quetelet, and it doesn't take into account muscle mass or body composition. So for example, a professional athlete with a high percentage of muscle mass might have a high BMI without being overweight.
Exactly. And what about people with certain health conditions, like polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, or hypothyroidism? They might have a harder time losing weight or maintaining a healthy BMI due to hormonal imbalances. Doesn't that mean we should be looking at more holistic measures of health?
Absolutely. Aiming for a BMI of less than 25 might not be realistic or healthy for everyone, especially if it leads to unhealthy behaviors like disordered eating or over-exercising. I mean, think about it. If someone is fixated on achieving a certain number on the scale, they might start restricting their diet too much or exercising excessively, which can lead to a whole host of other problems.
Right. And what about the mental health aspect? The pressure to achieve a certain BMI can be really damaging, especially for young people. I've heard stories of people developing eating disorders or body dysmorphia because they're trying to fit into this narrow definition of healthy. Do you think we should be focusing more on intuitive eating and self-care rather than trying to hit a specific number?
Well, that's a great point. Intuitive eating is all about listening to your body and honoring its hunger and fullness cues rather than following a strict diet or trying to achieve a certain weight. And self-care is essential for overall well-being. It's not just about physical health, but also mental and emotional health.
So What's the alternative then? Should we be looking at other metrics, like waist circumference or body fat percentage? Or maybe we should just ditch the numbers altogether and focus on how we feel?
Ha! I love that idea, ditching the numbers and focusing on how we feel. But in all seriousness, a more nuanced approach might involve looking at a combination of metrics, including BMI, waist circumference, blood pressure, and other health markers. And of course, listening to our bodies and honoring their unique needs is essential.
That makes sense. I mean, everyone's body is different, right? So it's not like we can just apply this one-size-fits-all approach to health and wellness. I'm curious, what do you think about the idea of health at every size? The concept that people can be healthy regardless of their weight or BMI.
Ah, now that's a fascinating topic. The health at every size movement is all about recognizing that weight and health are not always directly correlated. It's possible for people to be healthy at a variety of weights and sizes, as long as they're engaging in healthy behaviors like regular exercise, balanced eating, and stress management.
Wow, I love that. It's so liberating to think about health in a more holistic way, rather than just focusing on the number on the scale. Can we talk more about what healthy actually means in this context? Is it just about physical health, or does it encompass mental and emotional well-being too?
Absolutely. When we talk about health, we should be looking at the whole person, physical, mental, and emotional. It's not just about avoiding chronic diseases or maintaining a certain weight. It's about cultivating a sense of overall well-being and resilience.
That's so important. I feel like we often get caught up in these narrow definitions of health and forget to look at the bigger picture, right?
Next up, we're discussing the double-edged sword of the life is precious mindset and how it can sometimes be used to unintentionally shame those who are struggling. I mean, think about it. When someone's going through a tough time, we often hear people say, "Hey, life is precious, you should be grateful for what you have." But does that really help? Or does it just add to the pressure?
That's a great point. I never thought about it that way. Isn't the whole idea of life being precious supposed to be like inspiring and motivational?
Exactly. It is. But when taken out of context or used as a one-size-fits-all solution, it can come across as insensitive. For instance, imagine someone who's struggling with depression and they're told to just appreciate life. That's not only unhelpful, but it also diminishes their very real emotional pain.
Right? I see what you mean. Like if someone's going through a rough patch, the last thing they need is to be reminded of all the things they should be grateful for. That can actually make them feel worse, like they're not allowed to feel sad or angry.
Precisely. It's almost as if we're saying, "Hey, you shouldn't be feeling that way. Just be thankful for what you have." But what about when someone's struggling to even get out of bed in the morning? Telling them life is precious doesn't necessarily give them the tools or support they need to cope with their struggles.
Yeah. And it's not just that. I mean, think about all the people who are dealing with, like, chronic illnesses or disabilities. Being told life is precious can be, in a way, invalidating their experiences. It's like they're already aware of the value of life, but they're also struggling to make it through each day.
That's such a valid point. We need to acknowledge that everyone's struggles are unique, and what might be helpful for one person might not be the same for another. Rather than just telling people to appreciate life, we should focus on providing tangible support and resources to help them navigate their challenges.
I never thought about it this way. But now that you mention it, it makes total sense. I mean, instead of just saying life is precious, maybe we should be asking, how can I help? Or what do you need from me right now?
Exactly. By shifting our focus from simply appreciating life to actively supporting those around us, we can create a more compassionate and understanding environment. It's not about guilt-tripping people into being grateful, it's about providing genuine support and resources to help them thrive.
Right? And that reminds me of something Kobe Bryant once said. My hope is that you know you're worthy of being great in this lifetime. Maybe we should be focusing on helping people discover their own worth and potential, rather than just telling them life is precious.
Ah, what a beautiful quote. And it ties perfectly into the idea of empowering people to find their own path and purpose. By doing so, we can help them develop a sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on external validation or comparison.
Yeah. This conversation is really making me think about my own life and how I approach challenges. Like, what if instead of just telling myself to appreciate what I have, I focused on finding ways to make my life more meaningful and fulfilling?
That's the exact mindset shift we need. By focusing on growth, self-awareness, and support, we can create a more compassionate and empowering environment for everyone. And that's when the idea of life being precious becomes truly powerful, not as a guilt trip, but as a reminder of our capacity to make a positive impact in the world. Next up, we're diving into the world of inspirational quotes and cliches, exploring whether they truly motivate us to make the most of our lives or if they create unrealistic expectations and induce guilt in individuals who feel they're not doing enough. I mean, think about it. How many times have you seen a quote like YOLO or seize the day and felt a surge of motivation, only to feel guilty when you're not living up to those lofty standards? It's like, what even is the point of these quotes if they just make us feel bad about ourselves?
Right. I never thought about it that way. I mean, I love inspirational quotes, but sometimes I do feel like I'm not doing enough. Like, I'll see a quote that says, "You have one wild and precious life," and I'm just over here thinking, yeah, yeah, I get it. I should be out traveling the world or something. But, is that really what it's all about?
Exactly. It's like we're bombarded with these messages telling us to live life to the fullest, but what does that even mean? Is it just about checking off a bucket list, or is it about truly living in the moment? I think about Anne Hathaway's interview where she talked about not knowing if she's in middle age because, she could get hit by a car later that day. It's this idea that we don't really know how much time we have, so maybe we should just focus on being present rather than trying to fit some idealized version of living.
Oh, wow. That's so profound. I never thought about it like that. But, doesn't that just lead to analysis paralysis? Like if we're always worried about not knowing how much time we have, won't we just end up stuck in our heads trying to figure out the best way to spend our time?
That's a great point. It's like we can get so caught up in trying to optimize our lives that we forget to actually live them. I think that's where the concept of memento mori comes in, remembering that we're going to die and using that as motivation to live in the present moment. But, how do we balance that with the need to plan for the future and make the most of our time?
You're right. It's like, I want to be mindful of my mortality, but I also don't want to just sit around twiddling my thumbs, waiting for something to fall through the sky. What about people who do manage to live in the moment, though? Like, are they just naturally more carefree? Or is there something we can learn from them?
Great question. I think it's a combination of both. Some people may be more naturally inclined to living in the present, but for the rest of us, it takes practice and intention. It's about finding ways to cultivate mindfulness and presence in our daily lives, whether that's through meditation, journaling, or simply paying attention to our surroundings. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it feels like we're just going through the motions, waiting for something more meaningful to come along.
Yeah, I can relate to that feeling. It's like we're all just trying to figure things out as we go along, and maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not about having all the answers or living up to some idealized standard, but just about showing up and being present in each moment.
Exactly. And I think that's where inspirational quotes can actually be helpful, not as a way to guilt trip ourselves into doing more, but as a reminder to stay present and focused on what truly matters. So the next time you see a quote that says seize the day, maybe instead of feeling guilty or overwhelmed, you can just take a deep breath and say, okay, I'm here, I'm now, let's do this.